Felly, croeso heno ar nos Wener. Welcome to you all on a Friday night as we as a Senedd begin this event, a panel discussion where we are going to be discussing issues that are, of course, of interest and prominence, particularly during Black History Month, but of course throughout the year as well. And Black History Month provides us with an opportunity to explore, discover and celebrate the achievements and contributions made by individuals with African and African Caribbean heritage. And we want to, as a Senedd, promote discussion around those issues, not only in the historical context, but also in how it shapes and frames the Wales that we are today. I'm joined by four great panelists. I'm very happy that you've found time in your busy lives, varied lives, to come and join us and discuss matters tonight. I just need to say at this point that there is translation equipment available. This is broadcast in both Welsh and English, and therefore it's available to all. I'll just say very quickly that we have four panelists. Ashton Hewitt is a Dragons rugby player. I've just started to follow you on Twitter, Ashton, and you're worth a follow. Most definitely you say interesting and important things on Twitter, and keep doing it. Daniel Death, of course, is the Lord Mayor of Cardiff, councillor, and a figure who was key to the removal of the statue of Thomas Picton from the City Hall most recently, and congratulations on doing that important piece of work. Eric Ngalle Charles, a writer, a poet here in Wales, and you're doing all kinds of riveting stuff, both in Wales and outside of Wales. Eric, and then Rosie Harris, founder and editor of The Style of the City magazine. You may say a few things about that. It sounds really interesting. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to actually start by, even though I've introduced you, I just want you to say a little bit about yourself, what you do in a bit more detail than I've just done there, and why you think Black History Month is important to you as an individual as well. I'm going to start with you, Ashton. Your name starts with an A. That's as good a reason as any. You probably get picked on quite a bit to start because of the alphabetical order of your name. But just say a little bit about yourself, Ashton, to us.
So I'm a professional rugby player for the Dragons, based in Newport. So I play for my home city, which is great. Born and raised in Newport, in the inner city for most of my life, and then moved sort of out of the inner city to a place called Caerdydd. And then when I was around 15, which was more of a middle class area, so I've had the privilege of experiencing sort of two sides of life, which has been amazing and hugely beneficial for me. I do, alongside rugby, I've done some stuff in uni. I did my degree in criminology, and I'm just doing a master's in HR and business management at the moment. And that's about it, really. I also do some work with a group called Positive Futures, which work with sort of less privileged children and families, and using sport combined with education, really, to sort of help kids learn, crucial skills and whatnot. So that's pretty much my life.
I think it sounds pretty busy to me, so I'm really pleased you managed to find time to join us tonight. Daniel, say a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. My name's Dan. I'm a city councillor here in Cardiff. I was first elected in 2012. That's quite a significant year for the city. There's a big change politically. Lots of new people came into Cardiff politics, one of them being me. And I've held various roles over my time as a councillor. I've been a scrutiny chamber, it's like being a government minister. And about 18 months ago, my peers selected me to be the mayor of Cardiff. It's obviously a huge, huge honour. It's a very historic role that goes all the way back to 1126, which is really phenomenal to think about. And I'm the first black person ever to hold the role. That feels like a huge milestone. And in Cardiff, the mayor works slightly differently to the way it does in other cities, as in it's very, very non-political. You're limited in what you can say and what you can do. And I came into office at the same time as Majid stepped down as the Lord Mayor of Sheffield, who was wonderful. He used his time as mayor as a platform to campaign to stay in the European Union, and he bashed Donald Trump. He didn't want Donald Trump to be in Sheffield. And in Cardiff, it works very, very differently. You can't do anything like that. I was very determined to talk about things I want to talk about race, about being black, about class. So I've tried to do that. Obviously, I'm on my best behaviour, and some of the things I've said I think have been very anodyne, but I've been surprised by the reaction of some people. I did an interview with Wales Online about being mayor. The journalist asked me if I'd ever experienced racism. I said, well, I think most non-white people experience racism in some form or another to some degree, which I don't think is a very controversial thing to say. And they went, oh my God, you're joking, really, Jesus, I think it really says a lot about the media and about how few non-white people that are in these kind of spaces. But my time of mayor should have come to an end in May, but I've been given a kind of second lease of life because of the coronavirus pandemic. So I've been mayor wonderfully through the Black Lives Matter period, and I was able to use my platform to call for the removal of the Thomas Picton statue. Thomas Picton was a famous governor of Trinidad, known for his cruelty to the island's inhabitants and to the slaves he owned. And I've talked about that loads, so I won't bore you with it all again. But it was a huge achievement. It's been a really great time for me. It's wonderful to meet so many young people, so many politicised black people. So it's a very, very optimistic moment.
Can you hear?
Can't hear anything.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, I played around with my own sound stuff and obviously turned myself off without knowing. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I was just telling you, Daniel, that it's not boring at all to talk about the removal of the statue. It was a really important piece of work that you did, and keep talking about it. Eric, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much, Elin, and nice to meet you, Lord Mayor, Rosie, and again, Ashton. My name is Eric Ngalle Charles. Eric is a name my mother calls me when I've done something wrong. So when I came to Cardiff or in Wales in the July of 1999, I had been stripped of my identity. All I had were my memories. So it was extremely important for me to kind of be a bridge builder between Wales, the country that gave me back my name, and Cameroon, where I was from. You see, my name has not always been Eric Charles. When I was 8 years old, Father Francis from Bangor was visiting as a missionary in Cameroon. Because he could not pronounce my names, which were Muremongwa Ngalle, I was baptized, and upon baptism, my names were changed. So there has always been that interrelationship between Wales and Cameroon, and I'm from a very unique place because the Portuguese first dipped their toes in Cameroon, then the Germans, and then the French, and now the English. So I came to Wales all those years ago. I made a deliberate decision that I'm going to familiarize myself with the literatures of Wales. So I met Graham Davies, I met John Gower, I met the National Poet of Wales, I met Mike Jenkins, I met Gareth Ryder Davies, and I started studying literature of Wales. And I realized that the relationship with this literature and of Wales and Africa was kind of fantasy. So the National Poet of Wales has a poem that is called Kampala. When I read it, I was so excited thinking that he had gone to Kampala, but no, he wrote this poem from the same perspective as Tennyson wrote Charge of the Light Brigade. See, Tennyson had never been to Crimea or experienced the Crimean War. He read newspapers about the casualties of war and wrote this beautiful poem. And I started creating this relationship with these wonderful Welsh writers. And in 2018, the bridge that I was building between Wales and Cameroon came into fruition, thanks to Wales Arts International, because for the first time, the National Poet of Wales, Mr. Evo Abglin, Mike Jenkins, and I actually went to Cameroon. So they experienced a little bit of Africa, albeit Cameroon. And it was important because Cameroon is Africa in microcosm. So I kind of paid back the investment that Wales invested in me with these two writers. And then, in fact, in February of this year, I was in Cameroon again with Yestin Time and Cleo Maddox. And for the first time, two Welsh writers attended the Festival of Emerging Writers in Africa. So we are doing this cross-cultural exchange, and this is the first time that Wales has actually made a conscious decision to interact with an African country, not through colonial lenses, but through literature.
That's fabulous. That sounds so interesting, and it's so great to know that Welsh artists and writers are being involved and that getting the experience that you're leading them with, Eric. That sounds really great. And Rosie, you're asked to introduce yourself just because your name begins with an R and it's in the alphabet in that way. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Rosie.
Well, hi, and thank you for having me. Well, I'm the founder and the director of Style of the City magazine. So we're a quarterly title, and we're also a digital platform. We tap into a specific audience, but I think having this platform has allowed me to explore different stories, interact more with the people, and we just pride ourselves on quality and content. It's something I'm extremely passionate about. It's my baby. And growing up in Barry, living in Cardiff, living in London, you know, it's given me sort of an appetite, and coming back and creating the publication and the brand gave me a love again for Wales and being proud of being Welsh, and of course being a woman of colour that's doing this and that's made this literally from the ground up. And so I'm just very passionate about diversity, but of course sharing anything I can to people that, you know, want to get into the publishing world, or they have an idea, they have ambition, they have drive, and that's something that I'm really passionate about. And yeah, in a nutshell, going on a bit.
Yeah, no, that all sounds really great. And you know, we've got all of life in front of us. On my screen in front of me now, we've got sports, the arts, publishing, politics. All of life is here mixed in the four of you. So that's really really good. You're all role models in your fields, whether you accept it or know it yourselves, but you are, because people are starting and are looking to you for ideas and inspiration. Do you think of yourself as role models? Do you carry, what kind of level of responsibility does it carry for you as individuals in your communities, in your sport, in your arts, in your politics, thinking of yourself as role models? Not that it makes you feel too big-headed or anything, but the responsibility that comes with actually talking out about issues that are important to you. Do you think that that's an important thing for you to do, or do you just ignore that part of your life and just carry on with your work? I'll come to you first, Rosie, this time, if you don't mind.
It's fine, come to me first. Every issue that I do, I'm consciously aware that I'm, you know, producing something that's going to be read by lots of people and they're going to engage with me. So I'm extremely pedantic, because I'm aware that having built a brand like Style of the City, that, you know, any opportunity in the world that we live in today, anyone with any opportunity to try and, you know, nitpick at it, and obviously also being a female woman of colour, you know, I'm consciously aware that I have to set the bar that much higher. And I'm sure the panel will agree with me, is that, you know, what you have to do is that we have to work harder, whether it's in sport, academia, in politics, because, you know, we're a minority in the sense as well, and that, you know, we have to work that much harder. So quality, I'm consciously aware always to keep the bar higher and higher again. Every issue we want to just get better and stronger, and how can we make it better? So it's always on my mind, and I never get complacent. So
do you think you're judged differently because you're a woman of colour, because you're a woman and then a woman of colour as well?
Okay, so I don't think it's the fact of being judged differently. You know, when you pick up the publication, you don't necessarily, you know, go, oh, a black lady, you know, it produces this. I don't think it's that. I'm just consciously aware. Maybe it's a subconscious thing that, you know, you have to work harder. And I think it's about, you know, bringing the quality, and the quality will speak for itself, and then everything else is secondary. I think, I hope that explains it. It's not a militant thing. It's not like, you know, oh, I'm being judged constantly, because then you get all paranoid, and it's not about that. It's just about, you know, I'm in a position where I've worked hard and I want to keep the level high always. And so that's what's in my mind as well. And then obviously being a woman of colour, you know, it's just showing people, yes, I'm a woman of colour, but look, this is the quality that we produce, and that's secondary, if that makes sense. I hope it's clear.
Yeah, no, of course. And, Daniel, you're the Lord Mayor of Cardiff. You must think of yourself as a role model. That's
not necessarily how I see myself, but I've found it really, really important, I think, to go out into the city to visit primary schools, particularly in the inner city, like Grangetown and Bewtown. And that's one of the parts of the role I've absolutely enjoyed the most. It's such a pleasure to go and meet these, you know, wonderful young minds who are so funny and inquisitive. And the OECD International Think Tank did a piece of research that found kids' ideas of what they can do in life, what they can achieve, kind of solidify around the age of 7, you know. And role models can really help them realise they can, you know, achieve as much as anyone else. But I think the discussion around role models is really interesting, because I think they're important not just for non-white kids, you know, but they're important for white kids. If you listen to a lot of the discourse around race in Britain, you'd be forgiven for getting the impression that people from the Philippines were put on, you know, God's green earth for the sole purpose of doing jobs white British people didn't want to do, you know, like wiping backside in the NHS or that kind of thing, or grouting, or entertainment. And I think it's good for white people to see black people in these non-traditional roles. I think it's a good step toward racial equality. I think it's a much healthier society.
And you wear a big chain when you go into those schools, probably, and they're all really excited to see you in the big chain. It's so important to see a black man in a big chain, just as it was for me a long time ago. I was a very young mayor of Aberystwyth, the town I lived in, and I was a woman, and most mayors before me had been men, 70-year-old men. Not that there's anything wrong with 70-year-old men, but not all mayors should be white 70-year-old men. So it's so important that people see people doing things in non-traditional roles, as you say, and it's important actually to wear the chain as well sometimes, so that you break the stereotype of the people who've historically worn that chain. Ashton, in sport, of course, you're a role model in your home city and on a Welsh stage as well by now as well. Do you see yourself as a role model, or are you still looking at others who've inspired you, because you're still a young man, others who've inspired you as a role model as a young black man in sport?
Yeah, I had my role models growing up. You know, there's not been a huge number of black mixed race men to have played, you know, for their country and club rugby in Wales. So, you know, my role model was Alec Brewer. I've said that a lot because, you know, he was on the wing, he was quick, you know, when he played for my home city. So, you know, I sort of gravitated to him straight away. I guess it's more of recent that I have actually started to feel like a bit of a role model. I didn't want to say it before, but you know, we do a lot of, you know, player appearances at schools and stuff when it's just rugby related, you know, when they're all excited to meet a rugby player, and a lot of the time they won't even know who you are, so you don't feel like too much of a role model. They just, you know, they think they're meeting someone famous. But, you know, of recent, when we, you know, talking about Black Lives Matter and Black History Month, especially, I've been doing a lot of work with schools and primary schools, secondary schools, and it's the most engaged I've seen kids on a specific topic, and I think I have been a pretty loud voice for my community at the moment, and it has sort of shown by the way that these kids have engaged with what I'm saying and questions that I've received from them, and also other people. So in terms of being a role model, I just hope that I rub off a little bit on those kids. And also, you know, any sportsman or woman, you know, to sort of have a view away from sport, because a lot of the time, you know, sports people's, you know, views, no matter what they may be, you know, can be suppressed because we're expected to just stick to sport. So I'm really conscious of making sure that everybody's comfortable for a start, you know, in their own skin, and have the confidence to express their feelings and their views, because I think it's important that everybody is heard.
Well, and we've seen how the power of sportsmen in advocating issues has been particularly prominent again this week with Rashford's intervention on school meals. So that's it's important to use your roles and to use them to positive effect. Eric, you mentioned quite a few names that have been an inspiration to you since you came to Wales, writers, many of them. But do you see yourself within the context of writing in Wales as a role model in yourself as well as seeing others inspiring you?
You know, 2 days ago, I was extremely shocked and surprised and happy that a friend sends me a picture taken at the Millennium Center, and they've placed my portrait next to Shelley Bassey and Betty Campbell. I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, these are not the things that I was consciously thinking about, becoming a role model, but seeing that is telling me that the work that one is doing is actually having an impact, and for that I'm very happy. You see, all I want to do is become a better writer, and so I have surrounded myself with the best of writers that Wales has to offer, and these people give me the best criticism. And they tell me, listen, Eric, this is what you need to do. And I'm transferring these skills. So I run a workshop at the Dylan Thomas Center, which on migration, memory, and trauma. And as a recognition for this, in 2017, the Arts Council of Wales gave me one of the highest awards to be given to an individual writer, which is the Creative Wales Award. But these are not the things that motivate me. I want to see change on the ground. I want to see that we are not pretending that we don't know our Black neighbors on the other side of the fence. I want to cross-collaborate, and I want to not talk about Africa from a fantasy point of view where somebody, oh, in Cameroon, do you still have elephants? As a Cameroonian, I've never seen an elephant. The closest I've come to wildlife is the black mamba that walks on the hibiscus flowers in front of my mother's house. So I want to shift the narratives from there. And this is what I've always been doing. But something strange happened in 2019. See, until 2019, I had been publishing books with small Welsh publishers. But in 2019, Parthian brought out the first part of my autobiography. And the next day, it was reviewed by a white guy from Brown or something. And this guy never reviewed the book. He just said the fact that I'd been published by Parthian was tokenistic, because he wanted to fit a Black man in the publishing landscape of Wales. But it backfired severely because he had not done his research. So you have Leonardo Brito, you have Isabel Adonis, you have David Magama, you have all of these great writers that I'm standing on their shoulders. So before you says about tokenistic, you have to do your research. And so being a role model is what people say. All I want to do is become one of the best writers of my generation.
Well, I think you've got the best claim to fame of all of us, having your portrait hanging next to Shirley Bassey. I think that's, I don't think any of us can match that one, Eric. You're all in different fields, rugby, politics, the arts and publishing. All of those fields, I guess, have an underrepresentation of people of colour. How do you think that you and all of us can address that underrepresentation? I'll come to you first, Daniel, on the underrepresentation of Black people in politics. It's everywhere. It's in council, Senedd, Westminster level. It's everywhere.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there are a lot of reasons for it here in Wales. I think, to be charitable, some areas of Wales just aren't very diverse, so therefore it's not surprising there are lots of Black councillors and politicians. But saying that, some parts of Wales are super diverse, like Cardiff, where 20% of the population are BME. It's a third of primary school children who are Black or minority ethnic. I think part of the issue is that I think with various roles, various jobs, once people get them, they tend to be in them for a long time. That slows down, the churn of new people coming through. Often takes big political events like the 1997 Blair government, people sweeping into power, lots of new people coming in to get that kind of step change. But I mean, I think really political parties need to do more, possibly the assembly.
Yeah, I agree. The responsibility lies on the political parties, especially to do that. And I think all political parties need to look at that. Some are better than others at it. Ashton, in rugby, you mentioned it, that you didn't have many people to look up to, men to look up to. Aled Brew was the one you looked to. How do you see your role now in promoting rugby as a sport with young Black children in Newport and in Wales? Do you want that to be part of what you do in promoting rugby as a place for more representation of by Black young people?
Yeah, definitely. And obviously the lack of role models has caused a bit of a lag in the number of young kids, from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds to sort of engage with the sport. A lot of kids that I've worked with, from a young age, they're very much football, and rugby's sort of, this secondary sport. So, and I think that's because rugby is quite a bit behind football in every aspect. And obviously, historically, there are reasons why there are a lack of role models. So I think it's just about being as active within the community as possible. And to be fair, the Dragons are great at doing that. Even more recently, they've definitely made it a key focus in terms of getting out and engaging with the community, with Newport being a very diverse area, is to encourage these kids, and demonstrate to these kids that there is an opportunity, and if you wish so, then you could make it as a rugby player, So we're sort of trying to mix it up and sort of pry kids away from football and get them engaged with a bit of rugby, which historically, for, like I said, young Black kids, hasn't been the case. So yeah, it's just a conscious effort on working in the community, being visible, and then getting as many role models as we can, and then hopefully, we can, get into coaching roles and, board seats and things like that, because, you want to be able to see people you relate to in these positions, and in order to think you can achieve them.
Yeah, it's not just on rugby, isn't just being about on the field, is it? It's about the management and the coaching of the game as well, and being seen as part of all aspects of the game. Rosie and Eric, you're in similar areas of work to a certain extent in publishing and in writing and publishing, but again, underrepresented areas probably for both of you. Rosie, how do you see promoting more women of colour in particular, but people of colour, ethnic minorities into publishing, the kind of style world? I imagine it's a pretty glamorous world that you live in. That's the kind of picture I have in my head. You know, how do you get more people of colour interested in that world, not interested, into that world?
Yeah, you know what, that's a really good question. And I love publications, I love newspapers, I love magazines, but I loved it when Edward Enninful became the editor of Vogue. That was a pivotal moment. That was a massive shift. And I think for people of colour that want to get into things like publishing, when we see other people, you know, get into that position, it gives us inspiration. So going back to that last question you gave me, I'm always reminded, I always have to represent, because I understand there could be, you know, a black or brown girl, you know, boy that wants to get into publishing. When they see that, okay, that she can do it, then I can do it. And I think we have to be consciously aware. I think it starts with going into the schools. I think we have to educate the children as well. You can be whatever you want to be. And I think it's about getting that rhetoric through. But in terms of, you know, when you said about underrepresentation, of course there is in Wales. I mean, how many other people of colour do you know that is an editor of a newspaper or a magazine? You know, of course there isn't. I think I had the privilege when I lived in London and I saw other people, my colour, you know, doing great things. It gave me that inspiration. So going back to what you said, and when you said about the style, it's it's all glamorous on the surface, but there's a lot of hard work that goes underneath. So please, it's like anything. But I do think that let's educate the kids. They can be anything they want to be, and you know, I'm aware that, you know, yeah, being a role model is such a privilege to me and something I take seriously. And yeah, I hope that's that sounds.
Yeah, no, that's great, and that's great. Thank you. And Eric, in a similar kind of field, really, about just inspiring more people to get involved in writing, and in whether that's creative writing or in factual writing. How do you do that, Eric?
You know, as an individual, there is only so much you can do. First of all, we lack fundings to be traveling to Bangor, to Abetawe, to Clandino, to go and pass these messages to school. So arts portfolio organizations in Wales should look at themselves introspectively and see what their intentions are and where they want to go. Because it's okay for us to have this conversation every October and talk about the need for Black histories in school. What happens beyond October? Does this conversation stop? Or do we create this system of equality where we want our children to look at us 20 years from now and be proud? You know, I started this with my daughter. When she was a young girl, the only book she liked reading was Eric Carle, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. But when I introduced her to the stories of Yomandene, Ndondondume, I intermarried the gods of Cameroon and the gods of Wales. She knows about Mabinogi and the fate of the giant and the fourth branch of the Mabinogi. I juxtaposed this with Ndondondume, the goddess of the sea in Cameroon. So do you want English literature or literature in English? So as an individual, I've been working with a group of writers to decolonize this literature, but that I can only do so much. Arts portfolio organizations need to rethink their strategy. And it's not about quick fixes. It's not about giving some Black writers a little bit of income to go out and do research. We have to plan. These are long-term plans. We should invest on this writers development scheme for the long term, and in so doing, maybe next year a Black writer will win Wales Book of the Year, and this is it. So you need this inspiration to trickle down. But like I said, as an individual, we can only do so much. The onus should be on these organizations to say, okay, let's rethink our investment strategies.
Okay, no, that's an important message for organisations, the public sector, the private sector as well to hear. That's important to say that. Of course, this is Black History Month, but Black History Month this year happens in the context of Black Lives Matter and the whole discussion that we've seen rejuvenated and reignited over that. In the Senedd, we're currently scrutinising a new curriculum piece of legislation. There's to be a new curriculum in Wales. There is much discussion about what the content of that curriculum should be in the context of the history of Wales and the role of Black history within Welsh history as part of Welsh history. Ashton, you mentioned the fact that you thought by going around schools and young people that there was far greater awareness now this year of the issues as a result of Black Lives Matter. People were more interested and their interest awakened then to those issues. What do you think of the role of schools and the curriculum and the teaching of history to how we can shape modern Wales and the future of Wales through our young people? Is it important to change it, or are there other more important things to be focusing on? Ashton, I
think everything starts with education. My first experiences of racism would have been in primary school. You know, even though they don't know the meaning or, you know, the history of, you know, some of the names that they call you, it's coming from somewhere. So I think education all around, not just for the kids, you know, of all ethnicities to understand each other. And, you know, I find a lot of Black mixed race people who don't know their own history. There's a lot of Black history in Newport, Cardiff, across Wales that even I've only learned as a result of Black Lives Matter and the protests and following on to Black History Month. You know, when I'm 25, and that's far too late in my life to be learning about my own city's Black history. So if I didn't go out and look for that stuff myself, I would have never known it, you know, and even trying to find stuff now in terms of, you know, an example being the 1919 race riots. That's extremely hard information to come across if you want to find detailed accounts of what happened in Newport and Cardiff. And I think those are events that are so important to history. And I think, you know, if everybody understood the contributions that Black people made to this country and these cities and towns and villages in Wales, that would go a long way in solving some of the racism that exists. Because one of the most common, you know, insults that I get is that, you know, you don't look Welsh, you're not Welsh, you know, and it's, you know, I am Welsh. You know, we have a long history in Wales, you know, but people don't know that because it's not taught, you know, from a young age in school, and it's not normalized amongst the history that's taught. So I think education is massively important, and I think it will go a long way in everybody's understanding and addressing racism.
Mm. And as I said, you know, there's an opportunity now with the curriculum bill that's going through the Senedd to address some of these issues and to put them properly into the curriculum and to make sure that our teachers are well informed themselves in order to ensure that everything is taught well and in an inclusive way in Wales, so that 25-year-olds in the future don't have to Google their own history to find it. You know, that's not what we want to be as a nation. Daniel, you must have thought quite a bit about this, you know, as you did your work with your motion to remove the statue of Thomas Picton in the City Hall, because all of that discussion was about the history that was being taught through those statues to the people of Wales. Do you think that there are weaknesses in our school system, in our curriculum at the moment, and that we should most definitely prioritise a change on this?
I think it's very important that we teach Black history in schools, but teach it appropriately and teach it in a non-politicised way. And I think it's also important if we do teach it, that we're able to appropriately support Black students who are learning it. So learning about potentially some quite, difficult ideas and quite difficult histories. But I think more generally in Britain's history has become quite politicised. We're in the middle of a culture war, So I think it's important to try and navigate our way through that and use it as a force for good, not a force to, not a stick to club each other with.
Rosie, what was your experience then in school of learning about your own history or the Welsh history? Did it reflect your own life and background? It probably didn't, I suspect. And how do you think does that need to be changed?
Most definitely. Ashton said something that was I totally understood that. When you're a Black or brown person, the first time you usually experience racism is probably in a primary school setting. That was the first time I experienced racism. I remember very clearly. I remember the person's name. I remember exactly what happened. I grew up in Barry. And I think one of the things, where the Lord Mayor was saying about teaching Black history in schools, I only knew recently that the first Black councillor from Wales was a lady from Barry, I think Gwen Hines Payne. So, I didn't even know that. And that was the beauty of, I say beauty, but what came from activism. And, the thing with activism is you start, digging a bit deeper. So kind of, you want to know things, you want to know the history. And it was only when there was it was an activism event in Barry itself. It makes you sort of want to learn more, want to understand. And I think, by doing Black history in schools, doing it right, getting all the facts. And then it's like, if I'd have known when I was a kid that there was the first Black councillor of Wales was from my hometown, that would have instigated some pride within myself. I didn't know this, it wasn't taught. And I think it's imperative, in order for us to make these changes, that it does start in the education system. Going back to what you said, my first experience of racism was in the schools. And I think it's important, because if that person that was being racist, perhaps he was taught about the history, perhaps he wouldn't have been so divisive. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, and I think it has to come back to the education system.
Yeah, and as you highlighted there, and it's obvious, isn't it, that Black history is all our history, of course, and it's as important, more important for the young white children to learn about Black history as it is for Black children to know the history as well, because it's all our history, and that's how we can create our inclusive school settings that then become our inclusive societies, that we all own that history, and it gives us all pride in having that as part of our history. We all need to improve our knowledge on what all of Wales is like, and all its variety. Eric, I guess your perspective, maybe as a Cameroonian coming to Wales, is slightly different on history, but how do you think that, looking from your own background, thinking about how Welsh kids are taught in school now, how do you think that that this can all be improved as a way of teaching inclusivity, good race relations in our schools? How's that best done, do you think?
I'm thinking, highlighted on what Rosie and Ashton said, how long must one live in a place to become it? You see, that's a question that bothers me. So for me, I take pride in the fact that I came to Wales. I had no preconceived version of Wales. The Wales that I saw is the Wales that I live and breathe now. When this Brexit thing happened, I came to the house and my daughter was in the living room and she was crying. And I pestered her as to the reasons why she was crying. And she said in her school, in Cardiff somewhere, her friends approached her and asked her, so Iya, where are you from? And she said, I'm from Ely. You know, they're like, no, like, where are you really from? And it brought some kind of a flashback to me because when I went for a job interview in Cardiff in 2001, someone was like, oh, what is your name? And I said, my name is Eric Ngalle. And he said, no, like, what is your real name? I said, no, my name is Eric Ngalle. And then this person said, have you got any other names? I said, yeah, Charles. And she goes, oh, like Prince Charles. I'm like, who? So like Prince Charles. So I'm processing this thought. You see, everything about me is a fragment. My name is broken. My language is broken. The only time I've had this identity that I fully appreciate is like when I came to Wales. And I don't want to speak about a Wales that discriminates against its minority. I want to speak about a Wales that is a melting pot of diversity. And this should be reflected in the education, both black and white. This is the starting point. And it will just come naturally. You know, I don't want to see a white person and just start thinking, okay, are they racist or something? You know, I want to be free, and I want to be in a position where I go in a place and I just be. You know, like there's a wonderful poem by Graham Davies, and this poem is called Rough Guide. And in it, Graham says, in America, depending on where I am Black, Cajun, or Navajo. But I wonder what it will be sometime to just go to these places and just be. So I want to be able to go to Clandidno, to Abetawe, and just be without people pointing at me thinking that this person is an outsider. So our curriculum list is a starting point.
I think I'm going to finish it there because I can't think of a better way to finish this discussion than with the words of the writer. And it would be the writer that came up with these words, that we can all go to any part of Wales, any part of the world really, and just be. It's not what we look like, who we are, what our background is. It is just us as individuals just being who we are, wherever, unquestioned, and all of us being at ease with ourselves and in our communities in that way. I said I'd try and draw this to a conclusion after 45 minutes. I had thought of maybe squeezing another question in because we've had several come in, but I couldn't let that moment pass. That is the perfect moment to end, I think, with those words. Let us all just be. Eric, Rosie, Daniel and Ashton, I've really enjoyed our 3/4 of an hour together, and that we've been able to discuss some interesting, thought-provoking stuff, and I hope that it's created a bit of thinking and discussion with those who either have been following us live here tonight or will see this broadcast on the Senedd channels after today. So I want to thank you all. You're really inspiring people in your different areas of work, and I wish you well with everything that you're doing. Keep doing it, keep shouting about it, keep tweeting it, Ashton, and just keep going. And it's been a really inspiring 3/4 of an hour in your company. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd a pob hwyl gyda eich gwaith chi a gyda'ch trafodaethau chi ar y materion yma i'r dyfodol. Thanks so much. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Hwyl fawr.
Hwyl fawr. Diolch.
Thank you.
Ta-ra, ta-ra.
Bye everybody. It's been great.